Hi guys, welcome back to the Grapplers Academy. Today we're going to be talking about a hot topic for people who are thinking about getting into Jiu-Jitsu but maybe have got a few reserving factors that are limiting them from actually starting and getting on the mats.
Yeah, so we're going to be looking at like if you're worried about your fitness not being quite there, sort of the close quarters aspects of the sport, expectations versus reality, as well as like a first day etiquette as well. A few little tidbits that you can take for your first few months of learning, not only your first day, and also like covers your kit as well as bits of hygiene and other little key bits of details that you might not necessarily have thought about.
We're going to be giving you the rundown, everything you need to know from selecting your gym, stepping into the gym and starting your training journey. So we're kind of talking today about what issues people have with coming into the first class in the gym, really, isn't it? I've heard loads of times, and I'm sure you've heard the same as well as loads of other people. Like, people are just intimidated about starting martial arts in general, but like, I think jiu-jitsu and grappling sports, as well as maybe MMA, has got a really perceived barrier to entry.
I think with that, it's the nature of how the sport's become popular, though. This plays quite a big part in it with the rise of the UFC, the media attached to the early days of that. And people are expecting sort of to walk into like a spit and sawdust gym and have the crap kicked out of them, when sort of the reality of it is, especially in modern day gyms, it's a completely different environment. You've got specific jiu-jitsu clubs and MMA clubs, and it's not as spit and sawdust as a lot of people are expecting now, is it?
No, definitely not. I think some boxing gyms. Not this isn't a dig at boxing at all, but like, there's a definite difference between going to a boxing gym and going to a jiu-jitsu or a grappling focused gym, isn't it? It's a different sort of environment, and yeah, totally. Like, if somebody's only experience of jiu-jitsu is watching UFC embedded and like watching somebody get armbar after armbar snapped on them, it might not initially look like the most appealing thing,
No.
but I think in terms of like overcoming or the expectation versus the reality of what actually training jiu-jitsu is like, there's a drastic difference, isn't it, between what you might see on a highlight reel from a jiu-jitsu tournament versus what actually your day-to-day training is like. And you could probably make that comparison across every sport, or even just going to the gym for that matter. If your expectation of going to the gym is what you see on Instagram, and you actually go into the gym and maybe you're starting PT or classes for the first time, or even just doing your own thing in the gym, the reality of what you're actually going to be doing is going to be drastically different from what you may have seen on social media.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think with that as well, there's a lot of classic excuses that tend to come with that as well. Well, not say excuses because it's a bit harsh to use that word, but maybe reasons as well, that are sort of brought up for not necessarily starting. Like, one that I more commonly hear, and probably you hear the same thing, is not quite fit enough for to do the class. Whereas us two, we'd probably look at that reason and be like, "Oh, don't be silly! Like, just come in, get fit in the class." Whereas that's a genuine concern for a lot of people. Like, it's not a common thing where you're going to feel that uncomfortable in your day-to-day life. So feeling unfit and going into a new sport and feeling like you kind of stand out because of this fitness can be quite a large barrier. Like, are there any other sort of similar things that you've heard, and have you got any advice for those that have that as one of their reasons?
Yeah, definitely. In terms of like being fit for the mat, I could almost tell you now, you could be a triathlete and you could be uber fit in the traditional sense of the view. But as soon as you get on the mats and engage in some grappling, it's going to be a very different level of fitness. And so, what I would say is, if you're completely unfit or you're extremely fit and you're used to going into the gym, your actual experience on the mat's going to be very different, because of the nature of the sport, and the way that you use your body is going to be completely different from anything else you've ever done. And that shouldn't be something that puts people off coming training, because you're not going to get thrown in at the deep end and asked to spar with one of the black belts to train them for their upcoming match. Like, if you've got a smart coach or you've got a smart gym, you're going to be paired up with people with similar fitness levels who've got a similar level of experience to you, and you can all kind of work and progress through that at the same rate. Like you said, it's the nature of the sport is quite claustrophobic in some sense. So even if you were very fit, your ability to control your breathing and like maybe use some yoga-like breathing style techniques are probably going to be something that's going to be more beneficial to get you to calm down and actually lower your heart rate first off. And to be honest as well, like what you're going to be doing in those first couple of sessions in the gym, again, there may be some element of what you might say was sparring.
Yeah.
That's not actually going to be sparring. It's going to be, you're going to learn a technique, and actually to learn technique and get a better understanding of positions and what actually is jiu-jitsu isn't going to require a lot of energy. Like if you're really unfit and you're not used to using your core, maybe just being on your back and trying to throw up a triangle is actually going to tax your core quite a lot. But you'll find pretty quickly over the course of those first couple of weeks or sessions that actually you get used to that pretty quick. Another one that I hear quite a lot actually, which I forgot about now, is like people complain about sore necks. Like when you sat in a closed guard and you're on your back, like actually just having your head up off the floor. How many people have complained to you that their neck's sore from kind of just sitting there? Then after 2-3 weeks, like they're not even saying it anymore because you're just getting conditioned to what you're doing.
Yeah, it's like I say, there's no fitness like mat fitness. And for me, that's something that I stand by, really. Like, I'm not proclaiming to be some super athlete, because if you put me on a 10K run, I'm not going to be in that top percentage. But you put me on the mats and I can roll hard for as long as needed. And I think it's until you've sort of been there, it's something that you kind of have to learn that the fitness is going to be completely different. And it's kind of hard to explain that to the sort of new starter, that don't worry about if you feel unfit today during this class. Like, it's a brand new environment. It's a brand new sport. There's an element of threat that you're not used to. So you're gonna panic. Your breathing is going to be elevated. Your heart rate is going to be elevated. There's probably going to be some degree of adrenaline as well. So with all those factors, like I said, you could be a triathlete, but due to everything that's going on there, you're not going to feel the fittest. But as you become more accustomed to the sport, you are going to improve your fitness in it, and you're going to progress and get more specific conditioning for grappling.
Yeah, and I could probably give you 2 good examples there, of like a good example and a bad example. So I think one industry that does it really badly in terms of the fitness industry, and like probably most people can make a good mental association with this, is like CrossFit. So how many people have you heard that say they went to CrossFit and got absolutely murdered on the first session? And like, for me, that's not smart. Somebody coming into the gym and they're not used to that level of conditioning, it's kind of just like, well, look at what we can do, and why can't you do this sort of attitude? Whereas you go to a gym and you get a PT, and if it's a good PT, they'll kind of slowly build that level of fitness up and start and assess from where you are at day one, and then ramp your fitness or intensity of fitness up over the course of the weeks and months coming. That is pretty much exactly the same as what a jiu-jitsu class is like. You're going to go in and you're going to start at whatever your level is and then build from that. You're not going to go in and go at CrossFit level 10,000 and just leave having a horrible experience. And that's probably a good way that people can just think about it off the bat. Now, like, barrier to fitness as a barrier to entry probably seems like a big problem for people to start off with, but actually in terms of like other ones that people are saying, like, I think the intimidation factor of actually going to a gym and participating in the sport, depending on what sort of a background you've had before, if you've never done anything like that, or martial arts or anything close contact, like actually just that close intimate contact, or what could be perceived as quite a claustrophobic feeling, to me is probably one of the biggest limiting factors that I've heard people say in terms of getting them to start. Have you heard the same sort of thing?
Yeah, like the way that I try to battle this with my beginners as they're coming through is I'll put them with some of the more experienced players, because they'll have a bit more empathy for it, but then also they've got a little bit of a less of an ego than somebody who's going to be a little bit greener. So then they can explain and talk the new starter through what they might be feeling. And if the new starter is a bit overwhelmed with it, they can sense that and they'll pull it back a little bit. But no, I totally understand with the claustrophobic side of things. I think that's something that David Goggins talks about quite well in his book with the mental. Oh, is it mental callousing? He like calluses his mind.
Oh, but it sounds like a good phrase.
Yes. And he talks about like, you get callous in your hands from lifting. I think he talks about callous in your mind and sort of getting tougher. And I think the only way to kind of get over not get over it, but work through the claustrophobic side of things is to put yourself in there, but don't jump in at the deep end first. Sort of start up with little small increments in it. That's why, like, when I've initially had like a huge batch of like new starters or beginners, I'll work things like turtle as opposed to like close guard or even any other position. I'll start with turtle just to get them used to the body-on-body contact, the pressure of somebody else's body onto you without it affecting the lungs too much. There's quite a lot of different games you can play from turtle. But yeah, I think it just depends on who they're with for the claustrophobic. And then it's kind of, if you notice that they're going to be quite worried about the claustrophobia side of it, be very cautious of who they get paired with. And I think maybe trying to create that environment where the beginner can voice their concern as opposed to feeling like, oh, it's a fighter's gym, I can't talk about this here because I'm going to seem weak. It's an open platform. If you're not comfortable, me as a coach, I want to know, because that shouldn't be happening under my watch, and I'd rather know about it so I can correct it, as opposed to ignoring it and thinking, do you know what, I don't want them here, because for me, I failed as a coach if that happens.
Yeah, I think, again, another probably good analogy that most people can relate to on this one is like, think back to when you learned how to swim.
Yeah.
Actually just going into the water in itself with no tools or no ability or knowledge to know how to swim is really intimidating, because it's going to happen when you can't swim and you've got no technique, you're just going to drown. Yeah. And that's probably what most people's like inherent fear of doing something new like that, isn't it? Again, it's like, going for your driving lessons for the first time. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what the pedals do. And it seems like you're behind the wheel of something that's got a lot of power and you don't know what to do with it. And it creates that sense of panic. And I think the thing that you're kind of getting out there, and important for people to realize as well, is think about it like your swimming lessons. You slowly learnt those tools over time. And then every time you came back to the water, then you were more and more comfortable to swim or go into your lesson. You're not panicking. So the more tools you pick up over the weeks and the months that you turn up and you're actually thinking about your training and you're doing it smartly and slowly, you build up your arsenal of techniques. And then being stuck under side control, which is probably one of the more claustrophobic positions that you can be in, if you've not got any tools to get out of there and you start panicking and your breathing goes haywire, it's quite distressing, isn't it? Yeah. Like, even now after, like a long time of training, if somebody's got you pinned under a good side control, like, you're going to take your time to breathe, but actually it's not the most comfortable, and it can be quite a claustrophobic position if you've not got an escape strategy of how to get out of it. Yeah. So I think just learning and having the expectation that you're not going in on day one being expected to know what you're going to do. Or like, you're not good. Your teacher or your coach isn't going to expect that you're going to know what to do on day one. That's why you're going for lessons. So they've got strategies in place to get you up the hill on that. And then the more that you learn with them, I think the more comfortable that you're going to be and the more relaxed you're going to be able to be on the mats. And it's probably, you and I both know, and many people make the joke as well, is like, less experienced people can be a little bit more erratic with the movements versus like a more experienced player, like maybe purple, brown, black belt. You know, you can look at them just moving on the mat, or even if you're engaging with them in that first bit of the roll, like there's a calmness there generally, isn't there? That isn't there in definitely white belts and maybe some blue belts.
No, I definitely agree with that. I think, yeah, like you said, that's down to just getting more comfortable with the sport and trying to remove that the sort of aspect of it of I must win, and trying to sort of check your ego at the door, because that's something that's quite a common thing as well. Like, I notice it more so in men than women. Like the females that come through like my club doors, they're a lot more humble, they're a lot more relaxed, they're more willing to learn. The men that come through tend to be a bit more ego driven, and this is across all spectrums that I've like where I've trained, and everywhere that I've been across, and they want to learn how to submit before they've learned the positional aspect of things. Like I've been quite fortunate with everyone that's come through at Hive where they've trusted the process, but I've seen it. I'm sure you've seen it like with everywhere we visited, where it's sort of very antsy and tense, and they need to learn how to choke someone out before they can learn to take the back.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen that like flow coaching. Sometimes like in my head when I'm looking at something that's going on, I kind of think about it like two stags locking horns and neither one of them is willing to back down. It kind of gives you that sense of feeling sometimes. And it's like, you know, you're not here for a fight. You're here to learn. So let's just back it down a little bit and relax and realize what we're actually here for. Because ultimately that ego and unwillingness to bring that level down is just going to hinder your learning process.
No, definitely.
And yeah, definitely right. Like women that I've coached before versus some men, not all men. Like there's that level of ego there inherently with men, especially when it relates to fighting. Even though jiu-jitsu is not necessarily fighting, I think that's what the impression that most people get coming in, or some people come in thinking like, oh, I'm going to learn how to fight, and you know they've never been put in a position before where, even in a learning process, where like somebody's choking them out. I think subconsciously to them that can seem like I'm losing.
Yeah.
But you're learning.
Oh, definitely.
It's hard to coach out of some people. Definitely, that's one of the biggest things that I've found. Initial barriers to ability to learn is squashing someone's ego a bit.
I think I know one thing that I find is depending on someone's like level of experience and how intense they try to roll with me will depend on how I respond to them. Because I know that I'm quite happy. Like if someone beats me and they're 12 months into training, you've caught me, fair play to you, shake your hand and we'll start again. But if someone comes in and they've got just those bad intentions when they're rolling, like everything's with like just intensity. There's no subtlety to the movement. I know that I'm going to roll differently with them, and they could be 4 weeks into training and not know any better. But because you've tried to rag my head and twist my neck off, I'm gonna slow you down and hopefully try to be like, just calm you down a little bit. But I think it's one of those lessons where it kind of either has to be rolled out of you, or you kind of learn it through observation and through conversation. But I think more often than not, it tends to come into it gets rolled out of you. And that's where you find the ones where the egos are a little bit more delicate. They don't tend to come back to the sport, unfortunately.
Yeah, and they're the ones that are missing out the most, because jiu-jitsu is a really good opportunity to become more humble.
Yeah.
And, you know, like it's quite a self-reflective sport, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a really good opportunity to detach from that ego that you've got or that you might have had from doing other stuff in the past, and really like self-analytical in terms of how can I look at how to develop myself on the mats. And inherently, always people look at how that can develop them in their life in general. it's very rare to almost come up against a grappler or somebody who does fighting, whether that be any combat sport, whatever, any combat sport. Like, they're almost always extremely humble people. And the better you get at the sport, generally, with some exceptions aside, whether they're putting on a character for professional sport or whatever, the people who can fight the best typically are the people who are looking for a fight the least. And I think that just comes down to having having your ego in check, having a good understanding and being humble. And that is just a habit or a mindset that's enforced over years of training. Somebody that comes into the gym who doesn't know how to fight maybe kind of feels like they're looking to prove themselves. And like, I think what you were saying in terms of it gets rolled out of them, I think like for maybe people who don't necessarily know what that means, it's like over the time spent on the mat and training with different training partners and having that positive influence from other people on the mat, kind of humbling you for want of a better term. Like, if you've got the ability to suppress your ego and be humble, then yeah, it gets rolled out of you and you become more humble as a person. But for some people, it's tougher than others, I would say.
Yeah.
And I suppose that kind of starts to make me think about the benefit of rolling with individuals versus, or like having more private training initially versus training in a class. Like, I've definitely had people approach me thinking that having private lessons initially might be something that gets them into the sport, then they can get ready for doing classes. And I think it's probably a really important topic to cover, because there is a distinct difference between having privates and versus the benefits of going into a class environment. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Because I'm sure you probably had the same situations crop up over the years.
Yeah, so my stance on that is I'm always a fan of, at least for the first 6 months, your primary source of learning should be from classes. For me, when you're doing a private with a coach, it should be to improve an aspect of your game as opposed to trying to learn the sport. Like, the kind of level of tuition you can get from a private session, it doesn't quite do the beginner justice, as the range of subjects that you can cover are too broad. Whereas if they come to the class and they follow the class syllabus, they're going to get exposed to every single aspect of the sport and all the different positions, the different submissions, and they're going to learn their style and what they want to improve on themselves. And then that's when, once they start to develop that aspect of it, that's when they should start to reach out and look for privates. Now, I understand there's a difference with like scheduling, availability, but you've got to look at what you can get, where you're going to get most from. And I think as a complete beginner going to a coach for a one-to-one session, you're not going to get the most out of that session, because you've got to look at one subject for the hour. And another point of that is the coach can't take a step back to correct you, because they're constantly in it. They're adjusting while they're in the position, as opposed to being able to observe from the outside, make adjustments and give you feedback on what they're seeing, which you can get from a class or even like a small group for the privates. But one-to-one coaching, I think, for beginners, I don't think it should be where you start looking at.
No, I agree with you on that, and I'm kind of glad that you touched on what my opinion of it is there as well. Certainly, like, because there are so many things to learn and absorb, sometimes it can seem a bit overwhelming at first, can't it? Now, in terms of like an actual learning process, and I think about this from a coaching point of view, or like how I can best communicate my point of teaching over to a class or a small group of individuals, the actual learning and making corrections of stuff from a coaching point of view is definitely easier to do with either individuals or pairs or small groups. It becomes a lot more difficult to get down into the small, minute details that somebody might be doing wrong when there's a class of 50 without feeling like you're neglecting everybody else in the class to focus in on one person's particular issue. Now, the flip side of that is that the issue that one person might be having, and I've often done this before when I've been coaching, is address that issue to the class, because you can almost guarantee that if somebody's having a small issue, even if you've not been able to get around and look at everybody else's individually, that might be a similar issue that's reoccurring for everybody else in the class. Now, again, what I will say is, like, from a coaching point of view, it's really important to be able to come out into third person. I always think about it going like third person mode in a computer game. You're able to see so much more in third person mode rather than being in it all the time. And from my point of view, like, I can see everything that's going on three-dimensionally, where you might be kind of here stuck underneath a side control or whatever. I can see what's going on in every aspect of it. So definitely from a learning point of view, smaller groups or breaking big classes up into smaller groups, I think personally is a good way to accelerate learning.
Yeah.
So typically I found when I've coached smaller groups versus bigger groups, that the smaller groups, because of the focus and correction that you can make pretty much almost instantly at that point, leads inevitably to quicker learning for those people in the small groups with the small focus. But I don't think it's a good idea to do one-to-one, as you say, because you're not able to go third-person mode on it. Yeah. Now, when you've learned a technique, or like you've learning techniques in classes and you've actually got the basics and fundamentals of doing it, then I think it's really important to do it on as many different body types as possible in a controlled environment. So that's where a class benefit comes in massively, because everybody in that class is going to be a different body type, shape, feel, pressure, athleticism, flexibility, strength, whatever it is. And the more different scenarios you can come up against it, like I always say, it's like data crunching. So the more data crunching you can do against different bodies, you're going to find out your path of how you do that technique best against everybody. And again, that just accelerates your learning. So I think overall, from my point of view, is like learning for me is best done in small groups. Like, to accelerate learning the best, that's not to say that it can't be done in a class, but then to practice, which is the main point of jiu-jitsu. You're trying to practice what you've learned, and actually probably where you get your most development from is live drilling or live sparring. Yeah. Do it with as many different bodies as possible.
Oh, definitely. I think to sort of add on to that as well, like when there's a specific detail that you're struggling with in said technique, it's very important that you ask questions as well. Now, what I try to always do in the majority of my classes is, before moving on to the next part of the technique, I'll always open the floor for questions. Or if I've had a recurring question, I'll bring the class back and I'll address that question to everybody. I think more so on a coach point of view, I think it's important to have the open platform for questions, as if your students don't feel comfortable asking questions, then it's going to hinder their learning progression again. But also in the same light, it helps refine the coach's coaching as well as the coach's technique, because you make it ask the question that you've not necessarily thought about before. So sometimes it'll be a case of, well, what if this doesn't work? And it's like, well, I'm showing you one technique out of a plethora of moves. So if that doesn't work, you can draw upon B, C, D, E, all the way to Z for a secondary technique. But if they say, oh, well, I can't do it on this person because this happens, it's like, okay, the mechanics are different here because they've got a longer upper arm or they're stronger. So we've got to manipulate the mechanics of the movement this way. So I think not only for the beginner does the questions make sense, but also for the coach, it just sort of challenges their coaching a little bit, and it helps you develop more as a coach as well. But yeah, definitely agree with small group for accelerated learning. But also, I do like the idea of sort of beginners coming to a bigger class setting, more so because the bigger class setting helps them see the vibe of the club and almost get just sucked into the ethos of it all. It helps them see the more students, so it helps them become more familiar with people on their first day. And also, there's more bodies there for them to ask questions with. Yep. So I'll try to pair up a complete beginner with 2 experienced players, so they can see how it's supposed to, how they can see how it's supposed to work. They can feel how it's supposed to work, and then they can also have somebody coaching them if I'm not available through how it's supposed to work as well. So Yeah, I'm a big fan of coming to the big classes as well as the little classes.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think one aspect that might be getting overlooked from people who are looking for private classes as well is, excuse me, you come into a jiu-jitsu gym, you joining a new group of mates, pretty much, aren't you? Like you're joining a family, so you kind of learning what every club's got a different vibe.
Yeah.
And that might be a big thing that either turns you on or off to a club, is like the way that the club vibes. I've tried at different clubs over the years, and they've all got a different feel, and that's basically dictated by the group of people that are there, but also comes from the coach down. It's like a waterfall thing, isn't it? You know,
Yeah.
the way that the coach coaches, or like their personality, falls down to the students. And typically probably what you'll find as well is students that also have a similar mindset, or like buy into that mindset, or like the vibe, will hang around, and people who don't will move on to other gyms. Like I've seen that over the years as well, and that's not anything to say about like, you know, there was the coaching was bad or whatever. The club just wasn't for you, because you're kind of buying into a new group of mates. That's where you're choosing to go and spend your free time and get involved with. So it's important that you also get a good fit with the other people that you're going to be training with. You know, equally as well, like you probably had the same. Have you ever rolled with somebody that's only ever had privates before and never rolled in a class?
Not that I can recall, but I can imagine it being a very different experience.
It's a bit weird, and it's probably a little bit of an eye opener for them as well. Because, like, if I'm rolling with one, if like let's just flip the scenario and say I'm the coach who's got a one-to-one, and you know, I'm providing a certain experience for them in terms of like always my control with them is going to be limited to basically what they can do. So I can step my levels up according to how their level is progressing, and provide them the appropriate level of challenge that I feel like they need to progress. And that isn't always going to be what you're going to get if you're somebody who's had privates going into a class, because somebody's probably going to try and smash you, and you're going to be able to smash somebody else, and you're not going to know what that feels like. And if you're jumping into that maybe 18 months after starting doing privates, when you think you're a certain level, and then you actually find out that maybe you're not quite at that level that you were at, that can probably be quite disheartening. And the first thing that's popping into my head now that I'm talking about this, and we've both seen the video on it, and this is it might be a secret genius, is there's a video out there of Craig Jones, who is a world-class grappler, probably one of the best grapplers in the world right now, rolling with a brown belt, a celebrity brown belt, who's Ashton Kutcher. And go and watch the video. It's really weird to watch if you know what you're looking for in grappling. I'm not going to say anything more than that on that, but the only thing I will say is he doesn't look like a brown belt, and Craig Jones isn't smashing him. Craig Jones is being very nice. Yeah, and even still that. So I'm going to assume that Ashton Kutcher has just had privates. I'm going to assume that he's probably not jumped into a class.
Yeah, it's been that contactless jiu-jitsu that Ricardo's been pushing forward for his sort of high-end clients. But no, I was thinking the exact same clip when you were saying that. Like he looks very out of his depth, almost. I'd say a fresh blue belt, if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah, the same. Just that movement, it doesn't look natural, does it? And for me, certainly, I would never want to be looked at. And from a point of view, like let's say I'm a certain belt, I don't want anyone to be ever looking at me and going like, really, he's that belt like, but the skill doesn't match. There can't be anything more embarrassing than that. Like imagine being a black belt and turning up to a class and just getting smashed by everybody, and everybody coming away thinking like, you know, really. It's going to be terrible.
No, definitely. I think another one as well, sort of before we move on to sort of what to expect in the first day, is selfishly as the coach offering the one-to-one, I want to use that time for my own development as well. Like, because if someone comes to me and they want to improve a certain aspect, then there's going to be an element of rolling. And it's almost I want to roll with the people that I'm training and be able to pressure test them properly. And really put them under pressure and see if what I'm taught in the session has come through. And with a complete beginner, it's not the most rollings done in that session, and you can't really pressure test what you've been teaching them because they won't respond well to it, because you're still sort of teaching them the beginning of the sport. So I think, selfish as a coach, like, I'd rather encourage people to go to the classes because we'd both get more out of the session if you're more experienced, as opposed to coming away going, I only looked at, we spent 45 minutes and he was sat in between my legs, and I was trying to drill an armbar for an hour. It's not the most productive session for either party, I personally think, in a one-to-one.
Yeah, definitely. I can kind of agree with that. Maybe somebody who's just starting jiu-jitsu and do the classes, if you've got a particular thing, like let's say you've been going to class for 4 weeks and you really can't get this one fine point down and you feel like you need some additional tuition, then maybe start considering at that point. But just like go to class and be willing to learn and listen. And just listen. Like, you're going to learn from somebody. If you respect them and value their time as a coach, just go and listen. As I suppose that kind of leads us into, like, should we see if we can do like a top 5 or top 10 things that you should be doing going into the classes as day one, or like those first couple of weeks. Like, for me, the first one before anything else is just like, be respectful is probably number 1 on the list, and that'll probably tie into a lot of other things that we end up talking about over the rest of the class. But that by, I mean, be respectful to your other training partners in the class, be respectful to the coach. Maybe kind of when you go in, just introduce yourself to the coach for the first time, start building that relationship, because you're going to know each other for years to come. Yeah. If you click in with the sport and you go with it, introduce yourself to your other training partners in the mat, but then also equally respect that, like, everybody's there to learn. It's not, you sitting down and having a chat. Everyone's there for a purpose and kind of buy into the vibe in the class. So I know it covers a lot of different topics, but probably number 1 for me is just like turn up and be respectful for what you're about to do.
Well, definitely. I think for me, the number 1 thing is asking questions as well. Like, I've not got a particular order for how they rank, because that respect is just as high as asking questions. And like, it shows you're paying attention. It shows that you're paying respect. It shows that you want to learn about the club as well as the technique. But it also helps to solidify your understanding of what's being taught. So I think for me, up there with that respect is got to be asking questions.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I wasn't saying like let's rank it in terms of order, but yeah, I agree with that. And things are going to have a crossover, aren't they? Like, yeah, turn up, have fun. You're there to have fun. It's a new hobby that you're learning as well. Don't feel like there's a load of pressure that you're going to need to compete within the space of 4 weeks from being there. That's your personal choice to test yourself out after you've learned stuff. Go in with the attitude that you're opening yourself up to something new, and that kind of ties in with maybe suppressing your ego a little bit. But again, that ties in with being willing to listen. Like, if you're willing to listen, you've got to be humble as well. You're going to learn because you don't know the things that the coach is teaching. And like, probably another point on that as well is, like, a bit of a funny note aside, is a lot of people who start jiu-jitsu will second guess the coach, saying, "Well, what if I do this?" Or like, if I put this here, like, you're laughing because you've seen it. It's like, just kind of listen to what's being taught. If the coach is a good coach, then the points that they're giving you are the points that you need to know and that are necessary. Like, what if I do this and do the karate chop here? Probably isn't being taught because it doesn't work or it isn't important. So maybe just listen to everything that's being taught first, practice it, and then ask a question.
I think, like, we were talking about this the other day. My favourite thing is, like, well, what if I start hitting you here? It's like, well, I can hit you back, If I've got more control over your body and you start trying to hit me, I'm going to win that battle. Like,
Yeah.
regardless. Oh, you're going to bite me? I'll bite you back. Like,
Grab my gal, mate. Calm down. Stop biting your students.
yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. Like, just yeah, don't second guess. Like, if it's not for you, don't come back. Like, if you think it's a load of woohoo, like, the sport might not be for you. But yeah, like, listen to your coach. They've been there for years, and they've learned from people more experienced than them, and they've learned from more people experienced than them. And it's the knowledge that trickles down. Just, yeah, if you don't agree with the techniques that are being used, like, ask the questions to your coach, maybe like the whys and the hows, but don't start going, oh, this won't work here, this won't work here, this won't work here. There's a whole encyclopedia of moves that you can use. If one option doesn't work, then a good player will have a second option, a third option, a fourth option. Now, having those extra options as a beginner is what you're trying to aspire to. So work towards that and build your arsenal before you start discrediting techniques.
That's a really good point, actually, and that can probably back us up a couple of steps before you even step in the door. And it's which club are you going to pick to start off with is probably the point one that you should start off with, isn't it? So look for an accredited club that's got a reputation. The coach should preferably probably have competed, so that there's knowledge of, like, trial and tested knowledge. And I kind of get what you're saying, because, like, there's a lot of McDojo stuff out there where it might be like, I'm just gonna like knock on Aikido and Krav Maga and some of the stuff like that, where it's like stupid levels of compliance on techniques that actually genuinely won't work in a combative situation. And, like, maybe from an outside point of view, jiu-jitsu could appear like that if you've not got that level of knowledge. But I can pretty much guarantee to anybody listening now who's thinking about getting into the sport, jiu-jitsu is not one of those woo-woo sports where legitimate techniques don't work, or, like, you know, there's no spirit chi bombs that anybody's knocking out. It's all, like, actually tried and tested. Yeah, I mean, I've tried it. It didn't work. Maybe my chi wasn't aligned on the day or whatever. But you could pretty much guarantee as a beginner, if you're picking a club that's got a good reputation and got a good body of students who are probably active in competing themselves, that the techniques work. So, like, turning up to that club, you probably should be coming there and, like, start second guessing the coach and questioning his techniques, because there's an observable lineage of like practical use of that tried and true techniques. So yeah, you could probably even back that up a step, couldn't you? Before you even walk in the door, pick a club that you know has got a good reputation.
I think for those that are struggling to find a club, the UK BJJA on their website have a club directory with a list of clubs that have been actually accredited and vetted by them. So the coaches will be they'll be checked for their experience and also where they got their belts from. So using the UK BJJA website, you can find a club that's accredited and you can feel comfortable and safe at as well.
Yeah, and probably also an interesting point as well, it applies to loads of things in life, is just because somebody's attained a high level of success at something doesn't necessarily mean that they're a good coach. And inversely the same as well, a good coach doesn't necessarily have to be a 10-time world champion at something. But yeah, like, you know, turn up on the day to a club, have respect, be willing to listen, you know, turn up in the right clothing, whether that's a gi class, you know, turn up in the gi, you know, don't be afraid to, you know, just turn up in shorts and t-shirt, or what you'd ordinarily wear to the gym if it's a no-gi class. People in jiu-jitsu class are going to be wearing, like, all sorts of colourful spats, or, you know, Valetudo shorts and all that sort of stuff. Like, you might get into that later down the line. Or, hey,
let your personality flare out.
Let your personality flare out. If you want to be the guy who's got, like, purple checkerboard Valetudo shorts on, or some Dan Strauss style denim Valetudo shorts and a lumberjack shirt, that's up to you.
Go for it.
You can wear whatever you want at jiu-jitsu. It's fine. But yeah, listen, have fun. It's fun, isn't it? I absolutely love jiu-jitsu. I don't do anything that's more fun than doing jiu-jitsu.
No, same.
Yeah.
Like, this lockdown has made me realise how much I actually miss the sport and how much I miss training. But to sort of touch on a few more things for the first day, like, as well as having like the right kit, so like shorts and t-shirt, or shorts and a tight fitted top. If you're a female, they do recommend thicker leggings, or even wearing undershorts under your leggings. Take a pair of slides or flip-flops with you, or shoes that are easier to get off and on the mats with. Cut your nails. There's nothing more annoying than somebody who's got massive claws on the end of their fingers and toes. It's a massive harbour for bacteria. So please cut your nails. Also, showering immediately after the session and cleaning your gear after the session. There's some key things there for you to take away for your first day. But yeah, most importantly, to have fun.
And as well, like you said earlier, don't be afraid to ask questions. And if you feel uncomfortable, don't be afraid to step aside. But just understand that the nature of the sport, there is going to be an element of something that you're not used to, and you might be a little bit uncomfortable. And everyone there is respectful. There's no awkward or like ill-intentioned feelings for people on the mat. Everyone's kind of there to learn and do the same thing, and it is just the nature of the sport. You're going to be in close contact, so hygiene is a massive one. I'm glad you touched on that, because that's one that is always present in everybody's mind, but completely forgot to even think about, because it should just go without saying, if you're going to be in such close contact with somebody, just be clean, have short nails, clean clothes. Like, wearing clean clothes is another big one as well, isn't it? But yeah, like, if anybody's feeling intimidated or afraid to go to the gym, don't. Like, most jiu-jitsu gyms are some of the most welcoming places you can go to. Everyone's really open-minded and humble, and if you can find a good coach that's going to help you through the process, it's like it's gold, isn't it? You can take so much from a good jiu-jitsu coach, not just what you're going to learn on the back. They can kind of open your mind up to how you can improve everything in your life. Because for me, jiu-jitsu's got perfectly relatable and transitional concepts that you can use in your day-to-day life, your business life, relationship life, everything.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. Don't think I've got anything more to add to that. I think we've covered quite a lot there. But no.
It's a big topic. Get out there and train. When Corona's lifted, we can go back and train jiu-jitsu. If you've been thinking about it, even for a second, get out there and do it, because you will not regret start training one bit. It is the best thing I've ever done, hands down, from a physical and mental point of view. Like, I couldn't recommend it higher.
No, definitely. And if you're struggling with confidence and struggling to find the right club, feel free to drop a comment in here or drop us a message, and where we can, we will help send you in the right direction for it. Thanks for watching another episode of the Grapplers Academy. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to hit the like button and also hit that subscribe button.
And if there's anybody out there that you think could benefit from anything that we talked about today, don't forget to share the video and pass that information on.